Welcome to Bingemerica.
During the Second World War, it was considered essential that a male workforce was kept back from active military service to be employed in certain jobs. If you jumped into a time machine and found yourself at a recruiting office during World War II, what job would be safest to sign up for? While most people hoping to stay alive would just pick anything but the infantry, there were actually other jobs that proved to be even more dangerous. So in this video, we're going to tell you the worst roles you could be assigned in World War. The video is going to be amazing, so make sure you stick to the end. Before starting the video, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to never miss out on any of our videos. Unbelievable U-boats. U-boats were German submarines that caused havoc in World War II during the Battle of the Atlantic. U-boats were so damaging that Winston Churchill commented that it was the only time in World War II that he thought Britain would have to contemplate surrendering. The Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany from having any submarines. To get around this, German submarine crews trained in Spain and Russia. Either way, by 1939, Germany had nearly 50 operational U-boats for the war. 10 more had been built but were not fully operational in September of 1939. Germany had well-respected short history of submarine building. The success of the German submarines during World War I had been startling, and at the end of the war, those U-boats that had survived were surrendering to the Allies. Ball turret gunners. Ball turret gunners flying over enemy targets had one of the war's most dangerous jobs. In addition to the standard fears of being shot down, these gunners had to deal with the fact that they were dangling beneath the aircraft without any armor and were a favored target of enemy fighters. Worse, their parachute didn't fit in the ball, and so they would have to climb into the plane and do the shoot if the crew was forced to bail out. They were also more exposed to the elements than other aircrew members. Turret gunners' oxygen lines could freeze from the extremely low temperatures. Merchant Marines. Throughout World War II, fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance planes dominated headlines around the world. However, flying boats such as Germany's Blom and Voss BV-138, Britain's Short Sunderland, Japan's Kawanishi H-6K and H-8K, and the U.S. Navy's consolidated PBY Catalina and Martin PBM Mariner earned a measure of fame in such vital roles in maritime reconnaissance, anti-submarine patrols, and air-sea rescue or DUMBO missions. Designed in 1936, just 2 years after the PBY, the PBM first flew in 1939 and entered production the following year. By May 1943, when the definitive PBM-5 model came out, it had distinguished itself in both the Atlantic and Pacific. Powered by two 2100 HP Pratt & Whitney double Wasp 18-cylinder radial engines, the PBM-5 had a maximum speed of 205 miles per hour and 3,275-mile range. The Human Torpedo. Human torpedoes, or manned torpedoes, are a type of rideable submarine used as secret naval weapons in World War II. The basic design is still in use today. They are a type of diver propulsion vehicle. The name was commonly used to refer to the weapons that Italy and later Britain deployed in the Mediterranean and used to attack ships in enemy harbors. A group of a dozen countries used the Human Torpedo, from Italy and the United Kingdom to Argentina and Egypt, and there are some museums and movies dedicated to this naval weapon. The Human Torpedo concept is used recreationally for sports diving. The first Human Torpedo, the Italian Melee, was electrically propelled, with two crewmen in diving suits riding astride. They steered the torpedo at slow speed to the enemy ship. The detachable warhead was then used as a limpet mine. They then rode the torpedo away. In operation, the melee torpedo was carried by another vessel, usually a normal submarine, and launched near the target. Most manned torpedo operations were at night and during the new moon to cut down on risk of being seen. Subpar Submarines. For decades, the U.S. Navy unknowingly received subpar steel for many of its submarines after a longtime employee of the service's leading supplier falsified lab results, calling toughness tests conducted at -100 degrees Fahrenheit a stupid requirement. The anomaly was only discovered when an alert metallurgist, being groomed to replace the worker upon her planned 2017 retirement, noticed suspicious results, Gene Johnson of the Associated Press reported. It's being alleged that the falsified lab results put U.S. Navy sailors at greater risk in the event of collisions or other impacts, federal prosecutors said in court filings. The supplier, Kansas City-based Bradkin Inc., paid $10.9 million as part of a deferred prosecution agreement, the Justice Department said. The company provides high-strength steel castings that Navy contractors Electric Boat and Newport News Shipbuilding use to make submarine hulls, the report said. Field telephone layers and radio teams. The handset on the EE-8 field telephone was not very different than contemporary phones, and the sturdy device can still work today. The EE-8 field telephone was used by the U.S. military from 1935 into the Vietnam War. It used a wired line with a maximum transition distance of 7 miles. The EE-8 used D-cell batteries to power the electric signal that carries into the signal through the wire to the other phone. It has a hand-cranked dynamo to generate the charge that rings the phone on the other end of the line. The case is leather with fabric insulation covering the cord for the receiver. During World War II, the phone was preferred to the radio, and the EE-8 was much more reliable than the backpack-mounted walkie-talkie SCR-300 and the handy-talkie SCR-536. The phone line, which could be run through a switchboard from a command center, was often run by soldiers during combat situations. Medical mayhem. Dependent medical care at Army expense or at Army facilities during World War II was offered only on an emergency basis and at the discretion of the facility commanding officer. This had been the practice since 1884, when such care was specifically authorized by congressional appropriation. Mobilization in 1898 and 1917 had brought a large number of state militiamen or inductees into the Army men who could leave their families behind. When mobilization began again in 1940, it was thought that a similar procedure would be followed. Events, however, overwhelmed the system as commanders of Army bases faced large numbers of young pregnant wives who had followed their husbands. This had happened in part because of the dislocations of the Great Depression, and in part because the wives of military inductees hoped to find work close to where their husbands were stationed. Although dependent medical care was not increased in proportion to the numbers of new dependents brought in by the war mobilization, medical care was provided for the 4 lower grades under the Emergency Maternity and Infant Care section of the Social Security Act of 1935. Everyone else in the airplane. Of course, all air crews over enemy territory had it bad. While planes are often thought of as a safe assignment these days, it was one of the most dangerous jobs in World War II. Deadly accurate flak tore through bomber formations while fighters picked apart aircraft on their own. And crews had limited options when things went wrong. First aid was so limited that severely injured crew members were sometimes thrown from the plane with their parachute in the hopes that Nazi soldiers would patch them up and send them to a POW camp. Flying over enemy territory in any aircraft was so dangerous that paratroopers actually counted down until they could jump out and become safer. Flaming thrower. A flamethrower is a military assault weapon that projects a stream of blazing oil or thickened gasoline against enemy positions. As used in World War II and later wars, it consisted basically of 1 or more fuel tanks, a cylinder of compressed gas to supply the propelling force, a flexible hose connected to the tanks, and a trigger nozzle equipped with some means of igniting the fuel as it was spewed forth. The portable type, carried on the backs of ground troops, had a range of about 45 yards, 41 meters, and enough fuels for about 10 seconds of continuous firing. Larger and heavier units installed in tank turrets could reach out more than 100 yards or 90 meters and carry enough fuel for about 60 seconds of fire. To achieve maximum results, several short bursts were usually fired rather than one long blast. Modern flamethrowers first appeared in the early 1900s when the German Army tested 2 models, one large and one small, submitted by Richard Fielder. Fighter pilot. Flying aircraft in World War II was seen as a sexy military job using brand new technology. Pilots were the knights of the air. However, there were critical drawbacks to being a World War I flyer, with a high body count being at the top of the list. Fighter pilots during the Great War had incredibly short lifespans. According to McLean, aircrew could expect to survive 10 weeks on average. The Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund notes that 8,000 pilots flying for the Royal Flying Corps, or RFC, died in training alone. This is all explainable by the vulnerable nature of the technology. The flight was new, and pilots were in open seats exposed to the elements and enemy fire. The plane, composed in the classic bi-wing design, was usually constructed of wood and canvas, making it highly vulnerable to fire or collapse. Let us know your opinion in the comments section below. This was all for today. Hope you liked the video. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon for updates and notifications.